It didn't begin with marble. It began with mud and fear. Long before emperors and legions, before glory and grandeur, there was only a cluster of huts beside a river, a village ringed by 7 hills and surrounded by enemies. No gold, no power. No prophecy, just a people who refused to die. Every war, every reform, every betrayal, part of a logic so relentless, it would turn a tiny settlement into the center of the known world. This is how Rome built its empire. Not by luck, not by faith, but by design. The rise from the mud. In the beginning, Rome was one city among many, hemmed in by Etruscans to the north and Latins to the south. Others had better land, stronger armies, and older gods. Rome had none of it, but it had adaptability. It borrowed everything. Its alphabet from the Greeks, its architecture from the Etruscans, its gods from everywhere, evolving from Italic roots, merging with Etruscan spirits and later Greek deities. Faith itself became flexible, reshaped to mirror Rome's expanding world. Even its army was borrowed, then improved. They created the maniple system, small, mobile units that could bend, retreat, and strike again. Where others built walls, Rome built systems. But adaptability was only half the secret. The other half was control. Around 509 BC, the Romans overthrew their last king, Tarquin the Proud, a tyrant whose cruelty had burned too long. They swore that never again would one man rule unchecked. In his place, they built a republic. Not a democracy, but a machine of balance and suspicion. 2 consuls shared command. The Senate, drawn from patrician elites, debated and schemed. The assemblies of the people elected tribunes, guardians of the common class, who could veto the Senate itself. This system was no utopia. It was constant tension, patricians versus plebeians, privilege versus populism. But that struggle was the system. It kept power in motion, never settled, never safe. Rome's first empire then was internal, the conquest of chaos through rules. Once Rome mastered its own order, it turned outward. At first, its wars were defensive, border skirmishes with neighbors who underestimated them. But each victory brought land, and with it, the opportunity for more. Rome didn't just conquer, it integrated. Cities that surrendered weren't destroyed, they were absorbed. Rome offered a spectrum of belonging, full citizenship with the right to vote, civitas cum suffragio, partial citizenship without it, civitas sine suffragio, and the coveted Latin rights, which promised advancement through loyalty. Every conquest fed the machine. New soldiers, new taxes, new allies. Empire by assimilation, control disguised as cooperation. But to rule the Mediterranean, Rome had to face its greatest rival, Carthage. Carthage was rich, ancient, and secure behind its fleets. Rome was landlocked, younger, poorer. Their clash, the Punic Wars, would last a century and decide who ruled the ancient world. When Hannibal crossed the Alps with his elephants and crushed Roman armies at Cannae, the Republic trembled. 60,000 Romans died in a single day. Any other power would have begged for peace. Rome did not. The Senate refused even to ransom its captured soldiers. Every family would bear its grief, and every family would fight. Years later, it was Hannibal who fled, and Carthage that burned. In 146 BC, Rome emerged supreme, master of the Mediterranean. But victory carried a hidden cost. Wealth poured into the city, gold, grain, and slaves by the million. Power pooled at the top, ambition pooled below. The system that had built Rome's strength began quietly devouring it. The Republic devours itself. By the 1st century BC, the Republic was a shell. Its checks and balances, once symbols of control, became tools of sabotage. Elections were bought, laws were twisted, and armies were no longer Rome's. They belonged to the men who commanded them. When Gaius Marius opened the legions to the poor, he gave the desperate a future, and himself an army. When Sulla marched those legions on Rome, he shattered the last taboo. The city that had conquered the world had taught its sons that power could be seized at home. From then on, civil war became Rome's real enemy. Rival factions rose and fell. The Gracchi, Marius, Sulla, Pompey, Crassus, Caesar. Each promised to restore the Republic. Each left it weaker. When Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BC, it was less rebellion than routine. The final move in a game the Republic had already lost. Rome's system had created men too powerful to control. Caesar was its inevitable conclusion, the perfect product of the machine that built him. His assassination was meant to save the Republic. Instead, it proved it was already dead. The empire forged in blood. From the chaos that followed, one man rose above the rest, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. Clever, patient, ruthless, he defeated his rivals, crushed the Senate's resistance, and declared that he was restoring the Republic. In truth, he buried it. Octavian became Augustus, the first emperor in everything but name. And he understood what his predecessors never did, that the illusion of choice is stronger than the reality of freedom. The Senate still met. Elections still happened. But every decision flowed from one man. Augustus wrapped autocracy in tradition and called it peace. The Pax Romana, 2 centuries of relative stability, began not through kindness, but control. The legions built roads that stitched continents together. Merchants sailed on Roman coins stamped with imperial faces. For the first time in history, one political system linked 3 continents in a web of trade, taxes, and trust. Rome had become more than a state. It was an organism, a living machine powered by obedience and infrastructure. The machinery of empire, how did it work? Through precision, through rules. Through scale, Rome's power lay not just in conquest, but in administration. Every road led to Rome because every road was built by Rome, 250,000 miles of them, paved in stone and order. Its currency unified markets from Britain to Egypt. Its laws, written, standardized, enforced, became the skeleton of Western civilization. Provincial governors collected taxes, legions enforced peace, and local elites governed under Roman oversight. Conquered peoples became stakeholders. It was empire as infrastructure, power that ran on logic. But that logic had one fatal flaw. It demanded constant growth. Expansion fed the system, stagnation starved it. When conquest slowed, taxes rose. When taxes rose, rebellion followed. When rebellion spread, more armies were needed, and armies cost gold. The machine that had built the world's greatest order now required endless fuel to keep from collapsing. The cracks in the marble. By the 3rd century, the cracks were visible. Inflation eroded the currency, plagues thinned the population. Borders buckled under Germanic invasions. Emperors rose and fell faster than statues could be carved, 20 and 50 years, many dying by their own guards' hands. Rome's unity, once its greatest strength, became its heaviest burden. To govern everything was to stretch beyond the limits of control. So the empire split east and west, 2 halves of a broken whole. The east endured, reinvented as Byzantium. The west decayed, slowly, painfully, inevitably. When a barbarian warlord deposed the last emperor in 476 AD, Rome didn't fall in fire. It fell in silence, exhausted by the weight of its own perfection. Yet even in death, Rome lived on. Its roads became Europe's arteries. Its laws became the language of justice. Its calendar marked the world's time. Its vision, of order through structure, shaped every empire that followed. What made Rome powerful was never just its legions or its leaders. It was the belief that the world could be organized, that chaos could be conquered with rules. That same belief built our world. Corporations, bureaucracies, markets, and nations, all descendants of Rome's obsession with system. But buried within that brilliance was the seed of collapse. Because systems forget what people remember, that control cannot last forever. Rome fell not because it was weak, but because it believed it could not fall. And in that illusion, that perfection of power, lay its undoing.